Welcome to another episode of the Tech Vault with Mitchell Sellers. I'm here today to talk with you about some fun that I've been having with GitHub Copilot. What's kind of interesting is we can combine Copilot with Copilot to create some agentic bliss. And one of the things that I've seen here is I get questions about how do we utilize GitHub Copilot um, agents? What's the right way to use things? How do we validate? How do we improve our code quality? And how do we kind of make things work well for us? So it's kind of funny. And one of the things that's interesting here, I used an agent to create the intro slide here as well. And my whole reason behind it is to kind of showcase the little nitpicky things, the things that we get that we maybe might not immediately catch, or that finding good agent processes becomes really important. So as you can see here, we have a casing difference. Copilot on the left has lowercase p, Copilot on the right has an uppercase P. Most everything else, for the most part, looks pretty good. The auto-generated image got what we were kind of going for here, right? We got the auto-generating code by Copilot, an agentic action scenario. Copilot over on the other side doing the code review for quality. Makes sense, right? So the reality is there's a lot of different ways that we can combine things together. And we have been working on ways to streamline development processes. And how do we really come in and leverage things from a Copilot perspective to increase developer productivity, but not necessarily harm the product quality, and balance those back and forth. And so, what I want to kind of share with you today is just a few examples of some things that I've been doing, and love to get some feedback in the comments. If you're doing something with your organization and would like to come on another episode and talk about this, I think it's something great for us to all share and talk about as well. So please do reach out, share information in the comment section. Would love to hear from you and what you're doing in the agent space, and how you're able to get things working for your organization, and be able to do things that make a big difference for you. So without further ado, let's jump in and talk a little bit about the Copilot agent experience itself. And so what I'm talking about when I talk about the agent experience is I'm talking about situations where you are going out to your repository and you're interacting with Copilot in a agentic fashion where you are asking it to complete a task. So in those situations, right, you're typically assigning something to the you're assigning something to the Copilot agent, and you're asking the agent to do work of some sort of capacity for you on that project. So you create the work item, you assign it to Copilot, you pick which agent you want to use if you have customized agents, and then you tell it to get to work. Once you've done that process, usually what you're going to see is you're going to see a situation where it's going to do its work and it's going to come back with something maybe similar to what we see here. So this case was a task to add API rate limiting to a project, and it gave a good summary of what it was doing. And it's important for us to kind of take a quick look at what was done here, because we'll spot some things if we have a keen developer eye. So it talks about what it was doing. It talks about the policies that it went through. So global fixed limit of 100 requests every 60-second, partitioned by authenticated username or remote IP, applies to everything. An auth name policy, 5 requests per 60 seconds stacked on top. So this is kind of interesting, right? That's stacked to one particular endpoint. Maybe good, maybe bad. Again, your decision. It's calling attention to here's the things that we did. It's letting us know, hey, we made those limits externalized to you can override them per environment without code change and everything else. Awesome, looks great, right? So get a little bit further down here, we'll see here the middleware ordering. It shows us like, hey, I was a good person and I added my middleware in there for you. Now, to the keen eye, and those of us that have been working with things for a long time, we're going to notice something incorrect here, right? it added the rate limiter before the authentication. If we do it before authentication, how are we going to be able to get the user's information, right? To be able to partition by username. So we've got a code smell in here already that we've seen, but let's continue through this a little bit. Let's look at what we have available, because we can use Copilot before we even get in and do our reviews to do its own reviews and potentially catch some of these things. And this is one of the biggest things that we've seen of taking that power to the next level. Not only can you customize agents themselves, right, to do better work in your way, customize your repository for it to be aware, but we can also then use the tools to get things done. Now, one thing that's really important to note here, the very bottom and added green arrow here to really kind of point your attention to it. This says, hey, when you're behind a reverse proxy, you need to do something else. And so it is aware, right, of the limitations of some of the things that it can do. Pretty good, not too bad. The code that came out of that was really pretty good. Now, what I did though is instead of reviewing it myself manually, I requested a GitHub Copilot review of my pull request. Now, well, I'm doing this, you're saying I'm doing the same thing, right? It's Claude Sonnet, same version, everything else. And I'm asking Copilot to review. You would think in a lot of ways that you wouldn't get a result that was any different than the result that you had originally went for. Well, come to find out, you can actually get some pretty good different information when you go and actually have the AI do a look at itself. So in this case, further down in this pull request, we've save the project names for confidentiality reasons. But we can see here that we have a pull request overview, adds built-in ASP.NET Core rate limiting API to reduce things, configuration externalized, changes, introduces rate limiting configuration, adds the rate limiter with a global fixed window, adds the auth policy. It notes that it reviewed 2 out of 2 changes and then generated 3 comments. Well, that's kind of curious, right? Why are we going to get comments out of something by the thing that just did the work? Well, this is that difference between when you ask an AI different things and different times, you're going to get different results potentially. And so here it summarizes, kind of makes a note of what's going on. This is great. It's a good double check that what we got done is what we expected to get done, etc. Where things get interesting is when we start to look at the examples of some of the things that it suggests. And just like the initial code quality, sometimes we might not get the best answers or best suggestions out of this pull request. So for example, this says rate limiting partitions by context connection IP address, which should typically be the reverse proxy unless forwarded headers are enabled. In that common deployment setup, all clients can collapse into a single partition and get throttled together. Consider configuring use forwarded for headers with appropriate known proxies, known networks as part of the app startup rather than relying on a comment. Okay, that's a great recommendation, right? We want to use something other than user host address because that's going to be, done. So what's interesting though is it takes some of the notes and suggestions that were left by Copilot before and deletes those. It also is suggesting that we change the user partition key to drop the IP address out of here. So what's interesting is in the words that it says, it tells us we should do one thing, but in the code that it's asking us to update or to accept, it's doing something different. So this is one of those examples of trust but verify. We had to decide if that is appropriate for our particular project. It's neither here nor there, but an interesting observation when we look at ways of using the AI to help itself or to help us be better. Now let's go one step further. This is where it gets a little bit interesting. The next comment said this global limiter uses context.user.identity.name as the authenticated partition key, but the issued JWT does not include a name claim and token validation parameters name claim type isn't configured. Therefore, identity.name will likely be null even for authenticated requests. Consider partitioning by a claim that is present, for example, name identifier, sub, or add or configure a name claim consistently. So this is something where it's taken the request and the change that was made and actually goes and applies a context that goes far out reaching like you would do as a developer doing your code review. And that's the difference between the agentic I need to code this and make something work, versus the I'm taking a larger look at the code as it is in the code base. Now, keep in mind, this is in a default configured repository without any real special guidance. So the results here are pretty powerful. And we can see here that this suggestion is a lot better suggestion for the most part, where it is looking for the information for the user to be able to try to determine, can we get that user's information by either name identifier or sub, and then use that information to create our overall key for partitioning with the rate limiting. This one, much more reasonable suggestion and recommendation. And again, something that we can choose to commit, we can comment, etc. I cannot encourage you enough. Give the feedback, give the thumbs up, give the thumbs down, so that Copilot knows what's working well, what's not working well. It's one way that we can help make things better. Now, if we move a little bit further on here, now we notice that it has another suggestion. This happens to be the exact same thing that I called out in the summary note at the very beginning of the session here. Use rate limiter runs before use authentication. So context user identity is authenticated, will always be false in the global limiter, and requests will be partitioned only by IP. Move rate limiting after authentication, or otherwise ensure the principal is populated. So really good job here. It caught the context. It went back and looked at the repository to make sure that everything is doing what it needs to do and being done appropriately. Again, a committable suggestion. So really good overall results there. Now, some of the other things that we can see, this is off of a different pull request, right? So those were actions where it's like, hey, you should do this. Here's your fix. Great, right? That's like the one-off that we have with a developer when we're reviewing a pull request. So the combination of letting the AI do the work, the AI reviewing itself, we get a good way to reviewing the overall solution to be able to get something completed. This example is from a different pull request that we had the AI working on, something that was going to resize images for us automatically so that we didn't take up a bunch of space. Well, Copilot came back here and said the pull request description mentions unit tests covering invalid input, but this test suite doesn't currently include a case where image bytes is non-null, but not a valid decodable image, i.e. random bytes. Adding a test for that scenario would both match the description and lock down the accepted exception behavior for malformed uploads. So this is a really good suggestion. But if we notice here, it doesn't come with a, hey, here's your code fix. What it comes with is a button that says fix with Copilot. So now we use the agent to build it. We did the agent to do the review, and now it's saying, well, let's fix it with Copilot. When I click on that button, what we get here is then now it is starting to write a comment where it's going to tag itself and says apply changes based on this feedback, which is a link to this particular discussion. What's really cool with this process is it knew there was something wrong, but it didn't have the right answer. You can choose to fix it yourself, or you can do this, hit comment. You're going to be able to then have your AI bot. It's going to go out, it's going to do its work, and then the same cyclical process is going to happen again. You're going to get the fix in, you'll be able to have a review of that pull request done, and you're able to use those bots together to really help you minimize some of the code efforts and things that you're doing one after another. Now, this is great. It makes it really, really easy for us to be able to do some of those kinds of things. Well, what are some of the other things that we can do? One of the other things that we've seen that's been incredibly powerful in our recent work is rubber ducking, or otherwise trying to come up with a solution for something. Maybe you know the general direction of what you're looking to do, but you want some additional sort of validation that you are choosing the right approach and the right process. So this was done within GitHub under the Agents tab. And we simply said, hey, I'm looking for a plan. And I'm asking it to, hey, I want to create an authentication endpoint. Here is my goal. I have 2 different projects. I need to be able to share authentication. I also need to share authentication with a third-party CMS that's on a different technology stack, but we're going to have some shared domains. Can you create a plan for this My goals with this are the seamless transition of users from one place to another. The mobile application is only noted here as a reference. Right? We give it a little bit of guidance. And we're very, very explicit in our guidance here to say, create a plan without writing any code so we can review the approach. Well, we fast forward about 5-10 minutes later, and we get a suggestion that comes back. The suggestion talks about what should be done, what options were considered, and how things are being done. And so this is where it's really nice to be able to get the reasoning out of the AI assistance so that we can determine why it might make the suggestion that it does and be able to kind of take those next steps from there. So in this case, it says we recommend OIDC with the Blazor app as the identity provider. We looked at other things. We could do SAML, we could do shared cookie. That only works in certain cases. Custom token, all of those kinds of things. And then it gives an overall flow of what happens for the individual users to be able to do the things that they're looking for, which makes it really, really easy for the application to be successful. Well, now we know a plan. The next step in the process, right, then is to ask it to come up with what we want it to do. So we can take that same prompting process that we used and say, create an issue for me so that we can, document this and be able to get things completed. And so one of the things that we're able to do is ask it to tell us, okay, this is what I want to see. This is how I want to interact with the code and all of the things that it wants the developers to do. So in here, and I'll zoom in here just a little bit to make it easier for everybody. But basically, it actually gives an overview. It gives the goal. It says, okay, our tasks, add this NuGet package to these projects. Extend the database schema because we need to add these elements. Configure the YDC in the application. Expose these endpoints. Define and emit the custom claims. Here's the things that we need to do. Register the scope for roles. Parent domain hint cookie. This is a thing for UX. Security and configuration, acceptance criteria, out of scope for this phase, and references. So what we get is we get a plan that has a developer implementable solution. We can now drop this into a work item and repeat that exact same process. Assign it to the Copilot agent, let the Copilot agents do a review, and rinse and repeat. This is a model that is really easily supported. It is something that is part of the agentic experience. And to be perfectly honest, we've seen amazing, amazing success with our projects and our teams being able to leverage AI using the tools that are here. We're not going out to crazy third parties. We're not having to bring in 25 different tools. We're able to do it with the things that we're doing with GitHub and GitHub Copilot. I hope that this has been helpful for you. I would love to hear what you are doing, what you might be able to do within your organizations, the things that you're seeing, whether you're having successes or not, or anything that you're running into. By all means, share with your friends, share your comments and experiences below. And if anything, stay tuned, and I hope to see you again on the next episode of the Tech Vault.